Why weak people pretend to be kind. You ever notice how the nicest people in the room are sometimes the ones you trust the least? There's something off about them, something that doesn't quite add up. They're always smiling, always agreeable, never causing problems. But you can feel it, can't you? That hollow quality behind their eyes, that performance they're putting on. Here's what nobody tells you. Genuine kindness has weight, it has substance, it knows when to say no, it has boundaries. But there's another kind of kindness that's everywhere in our world, and it's not kindness at all. It's something much more disturbing. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche, and he discovered something that makes people deeply uncomfortable. He found that what we call kindness is often just weakness wearing a mask. Not sometimes, often. And the weaker someone feels inside, the more desperately they perform this false kindness for others. Think about someone you know who's relentlessly nice. I mean, pathologically agreeable. The person who never has an opinion of their own, who bends to every request, who apologizes for existing. Now ask yourself this: are they kind or are they terrified? Let me show you something that'll change how you see the world. Picture two people at a dinner party. The first person, Sarah, agrees with everything. When someone makes a racist joke, she laughs nervously. When the conversation turns to politics, she mirrors whoever spoke last. When someone asks her preference for the restaurant, she says, "Whatever everyone else wants." She's smiling. She's pleasant. Everyone thinks she's so sweet. The second person, Marcus, disagrees when he needs to. When that same racist joke lands, he doesn't laugh. He changes the subject or calls it out directly. When asked his opinion, he gives it, even if it creates tension. When choosing the restaurant, he states his preference clearly, then compromises if needed. Society will tell you Sarah is the kind one. Society is wrong. Sarah isn't being kind. She's being safe. She's performing agreeableness because she's terrified of conflict, rejection, and her own shadow. Marcus is actually being kind because real kindness requires strength. It requires a self to give from. Here's the uncomfortable truth that Jung understood. You cannot give what you don't have. And if you don't have a strong sense of self, you cannot offer genuine kindness. You can only offer appeasement. You can only offer the performance of kindness while your real self hides in terror. This is why weak people pretend to be kind, because pretending is all they can do. Now, this makes people really uncomfortable. We've been taught that kindness is the highest virtue, that being agreeable is the path to being loved, that conflict is always bad and harmony is always good. We've been sold a story that nice people are good people. But Jung knew better. He understood that this equation, nice equals good, is one of the most dangerous lies we tell ourselves, because it allows weakness to masquerade as virtue. It lets cowardice dress up as compassion. And here's what really threatens people about this idea. If false kindness is just weakness in disguise, then maybe they've been lying to themselves. Maybe all those times they said yes when they meant no. All those times they swallowed their truth to keep the peace. All those times they performed agreeableness while resenting everyone around them. Maybe they weren't being kind at all. Maybe they were just being weak. That's a hard pill to swallow, because we've built entire identities around being the nice one. We've received praise for being easygoing, for not making waves, for always putting others first. And now here comes Jung saying, that's not virtue, that's pathology. You already know this is true, don't you? You've felt it. That resentment that builds when you can't say no. That exhaustion from constantly performing for others. That hollow feeling when someone thanks you for your kindness and you know, deep down, it wasn't kindness at all. It was fear. Jung developed a concept he called the shadow. It's one of the most important ideas in psychology, and most people completely misunderstand it. The shadow isn't just the bad parts of yourself. It's everything you've repressed, everything you've deemed unacceptable, everything you've pushed into the basement of your psyche because society told you it was wrong. And here's where it gets really interesting. The shadow contains not just your capacity for evil, but also your capacity for strength. Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." Let that sink in. The more you reject your shadow, the more powerful and destructive it becomes. And for weak people pretending to be kind, the shadow contains something terrifying: their anger, their boundaries, their authentic preferences, their ability to say no, their strength. So what do? They perform kindness. They become relentlessly agreeable. They smile and nod and apologize and bend and accommodate until they've erased themselves entirely. And they call this kindness. But Jung understood that this isn't kindness. This is self-abandonment. And you cannot love others when you've abandoned yourself. He also said, "The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering." Think about it. Weak people pretend to be kind because they're unwilling to experience the legitimate suffering of conflict, rejection, or standing alone. They'd rather betray themselves 1,000 times than face the temporary discomfort of disappointing someone else. That's not virtue. That's cowardice. But let me tell you something. This isn't really about kindness at all. It's about something much deeper. It's about self-worth. People who pretend to be kind don't actually value themselves. They can't, because if they valued themselves, they'd have boundaries, they'd have preferences, they'd have a line in the sand that says, "This far and no further." Weak people perform kindness because they believe, deep in their bones, that they have nothing else to offer. They think their authentic self is so worthless, so unlovable, so fundamentally defective, that the only way to be accepted is to become whatever others need them to be. So they smile when they're angry, they agree when they disagree, they say yes when every fiber of their being is screaming no, and they call this love. They call this kindness. They call this being a good person. But here's what nobody talks about. This performance creates resentment. Massive, corrosive resentment. Because every time you betray yourself to please someone else, every time you swallow your truth to keep the peace, every time you abandon your needs to accommodate theirs, something inside you dies. Something hardens. Something begins to hate. And this is where the false kind person becomes dangerous. Because that resentment has to go somewhere. And since they can't express it directly, since they've built their entire identity around being nice, it comes out sideways. It comes out as passive aggression, as martyrdom, as victim narratives, as subtle manipulation. You've seen this, right? The person who does everything for everyone, then makes sure everyone knows how much they've sacrificed. The person who never says no, then sighs heavily while doing what they agreed to do. The person who claims they're fine, then punishes you with silence and distance. That's not kindness. That's control through weakness. It's manipulation disguised as virtue. And here's where we need to talk about power, because this whole dynamic is really about power, or more accurately, about the illusion of powerlessness. Society runs on compliance. Systems of control need people who don't question, who don't push back, who don't assert their own needs and boundaries. They need people who've learned that being agreeable is the path to safety, and that standing up for yourself is dangerous. So we train people, from childhood on, to be nice, to share, to not make a fuss, to think of others. And these aren't bad lessons in themselves, but they become weaponized. They become a way to create adults who cannot say no, who cannot assert boundaries, who believe their own needs are selfish and wrong. And the genius of this system is that it convinces people they're being virtuous while they're actually being controlled. It tells them that self-abandonment is kindness, that weakness is goodness, that compliance is love. Jung understood that individuation, becoming who you truly are, requires rebellion. It requires saying no to collective expectations. It requires disappointing people. It requires conflict. And most people, most weak people pretending to be kind, would rather die than individuate. Because individuation means standing alone. It means being rejected. It means giving up the safety of the crowd. So, they perform. They smile. They agree. They accommodate. And they call themselves kind, while they slowly suffocate under the weight of their own inauthenticity. Let me show you how insidious this really is. Jung himself struggled with this early in his career. He was Freud's protege, his chosen successor. The entire psychoanalytic establishment expected him to continue Freud's work, to be agreeable, to stay in line, but Jung had his own ideas. He disagreed with Freud on fundamental points. He saw things Freud couldn't or wouldn't see, and he faced a choice. Be kind and agreeable and maintain the relationship, or be honest and face rejection and professional exile. Jung chose honesty. He broke with Freud, and it nearly destroyed him. He spent years in what he called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense psychological turmoil where he questioned everything. But here's what came out of that darkness. His most important work, his theories of the collective unconscious, archetypes, individuation, the shadow, all of it emerged because he had the strength to be unkind, to disappoint, to stand alone. If Jung had been weak, if he'd pretended to be kind and stayed agreeable with Freud, we wouldn't have his work. We wouldn't have these concepts that have transformed psychology. His false kindness would have robbed the world of his gifts. And this is true for all of us. Every time you perform kindness out of weakness, every time you betray yourself to please others, you rob the world of your authentic gifts. You rob yourself of your life. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you cannot become who you truly are while pretending to be what others need. You cannot individuate while performing false kindness. You cannot live while you're busy being agreeable." So how do you know if you're genuinely kind or just weak and pretending? Let me give you some signs that cut through the bullshit. First, genuine kindness can say no. It has boundaries. It knows that saying yes to everything means saying no to yourself. And that's not sustainable. If you cannot say no without massive guilt and anxiety, you're not being kind, you're being weak. Second, genuine kindness doesn't need recognition. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't make sure everyone knows how much it sacrificed. If you find yourself needing others to acknowledge your kindness, if you feel resentful when they don't, that's not kindness. That's a transaction. That's manipulation. Third, genuine kindness has preferences. It knows what it wants. It has opinions. It doesn't just mirror whatever the other person needs. If you constantly say, "I don't care, whatever you want," if you have no sense of your own desires, you're not being kind. You're being absent. Fourth, genuine kindness can handle conflict. It can disagree. It can stand its ground when necessary. It understands that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is tell someone a hard truth they don't want to hear. If you avoid all conflict at any cost, you're not kind, you're scared. Fifth, genuine kindness doesn't breed resentment. It leaves you feeling fulfilled, not depleted. If you're constantly exhausted, constantly resentful, constantly feeling taken advantage of, examine whether you're actually being kind or just incapable of saying no. Sound familiar? Yeah, I thought it might. Now here's the thing, and this is really important. Recognizing that you've been performing false kindness isn't about beating yourself up. It's not about shame. Jung understood that the shadow isn't evil. It's just unconscious. Bringing it into consciousness is the work. That's where freedom lives. So what do you do with this understanding? How do you stop pretending and start living? First, you have to grieve. You have to grieve the person you thought you were. The nice person. The agreeable person. The person who never caused problems. That identity has to die before the real you can emerge. And grief is uncomfortable. It's legitimate suffering, the kind Jung said we have to be willing to experience. Second, you have to start saying no. Start small. Say no to something that doesn't matter much. Feel the discomfort. Feel the fear. Notice that the world doesn't end. Notice that people don't abandon you. Or if they do, notice that they weren't really with you in the first place. They were with your performance. Third, you have to get curious about your preferences. What do you actually want? What do you actually think? What would you do if you weren't terrified of rejection? Start asking yourself these questions. Start listening to the answers. Fourth, you have to accept that you're going to disappoint people. You're going to be called selfish. You're going to be told you've changed. You're going to make people uncomfortable. And that's okay. That's the price of authenticity. That's what Jung meant by individuation. Fifth, you have to integrate your shadow. You have to welcome back all those parts of yourself you deemed unacceptable, your anger, your boundaries, your strength, your ability to stand alone. These aren't flaws. They're necessary for genuine kindness to exist. Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." That's the choice. You can keep being good, keep performing kindness, keep being agreeable and safe and dead inside, or you can become whole. You can integrate your shadow. You can develop real strength. And from that strength, you can offer genuine kindness. Not the performance, the real thing. And here's what becomes possible when you do this work. Actual relationships. Real connection. Because when you stop performing, when you show up as your authentic self, the people who stay are with you, not with your mask. You. You stop attracting people who need you to be small. You stop attracting takers and users and narcissists who saw your weakness and exploited it. You start attracting people who can handle your truth, people who respect boundaries, people who want a real human being, not a doormat. Your kindness becomes genuine because it comes from overflow, not deficit. You can actually give because you're full, not empty. You can love others because you haven't abandoned yourself. And here's the paradox Jung understood. When you stop trying to be kind, when you stop performing agreeableness, when you develop the strength to stand alone and say no and disappoint people, you become actually kind, genuinely kind, the kind of kind that changes lives. Because real kindness requires a self to give from. It requires boundaries. It requires the strength to sometimes not be kind, to sometimes say the hard thing, to sometimes let someone be disappointed or angry or uncomfortable. Weak people can't do this. Weak people can only perform. They can only accommodate. They can only say yes while dying inside. But strong people who've done the work of integrating their shadow, they can be genuinely kind because they're not kind from fear. They're kind from choice. Jung wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." Think about what that means. When you've faced your own shadow, when you've integrated your own capacity for selfishness and cruelty and weakness, you can see others clearly. You can have compassion for their struggles without being manipulated by their performance. You can offer real help instead of enabling their dysfunction. This is what the world needs. Not more people pretending to be kind while seething with resentment. Not more people saying yes while meaning no. Not more people performing agreeableness while abandoning themselves. The world needs people who've done the hard work, people who've faced their shadow, people who've chosen wholeness over goodness, people who can offer genuine kindness from genuine strength. You already know this is true. You've always known. That's why this hits so hard. That's why it makes you uncomfortable. Because somewhere deep inside, you know you've been performing. You know you've been pretending. You know you've been calling weakness kindness while your real self suffocated in the basement. But here's the good news. You can stop. Right now. Today. You can start the work of becoming whole instead of good. You can integrate your shadow. You can develop real strength. And from that strength, you can offer something much more valuable than false kindness. You can offer truth. You can offer authenticity. You can offer the real you with all your preferences and boundaries and opinions and strength. And that's what Jung knew. That's what changes everything. Not performing kindness from weakness, but offering genuine connection from strength. So what's it going to be? Are you going to keep pretending? Keep performing? Keep calling weakness virtue while you slowly die inside? Or are you ready to do the real work? Are you ready to face your shadow? Are you ready to become who you truly are? Even if it means being less nice, less agreeable, less convenient for others? The choice has always been yours. The question is whether you're strong enough to make it. If this video challenged something in you, if it made you uncomfortable in the right way, if it showed you something about yourself you've been avoiding, then you know what to do. Subscribe to this channel, because we're going deeper into Jung's most uncomfortable truths. We're exploring what it really means to become whole instead of good. And I promise you, it's not going to be comfortable, but it'll be real. The question that'll haunt you if you don't face it: how much of your life are you willing to sacrifice to keep being agreeable? How much of yourself are you willing to abandon to maintain the performance? You already know the answer. The only question is whether you're brave enough to act on it.